We're continuing from last week's discussion. Remember, the theme for these 3 weeks is sources in Jewish literature on telling lies. And we began with this story about the land of truth that seems to indicate that the Jewish ideal is never to lie, and that even a lie told for good purposes, a lie that is told in order to protect your wife and her dignity and tell a neighbor to shoo off, you remember this story, actually can lead to the corruption of an entire community. Because once you know that it's socially acceptable not to tell the truth, nobody's word can be trusted. Words lose their meaning. Then we took a look at examples from the Bible. We reviewed 2 out of the 3 stories, 2 out of the 3 biblical stories, which all indicate not just stories of lies. There are many stories of lies in the Torah, but it's stories of lies that seem to be okay. That's the challenging part about these stories, is that these lies that are being told seem to be, at the end of the day, at least by the Torah's standards, appropriate and correct and not a transgression, despite the fact that one of the 10 commandments is not to bear false witness. The first story we looked at was the story of Shifra and Puah, the Egyptian midwives who lied to Pharaoh about the murder of the Israelite boys. They get away with that. They're rewarded for their faithfulness. So the lesson is, to save a life, lying might be permitted. The second story, if you remember, that's on the second page, is when God, so obviously God can't be doing anything wrong, is when God tells Abraham that Sarah was laughing at how old she was, but he failed to reveal that she was also laughing because of how old he was. That is, a lie which can cause somebody embarrassment. Let me rephrase that, because it wasn't a lie. Information, while true, if it causes somebody to be ashamed or embarrassed, that may be a reason to withhold that information, or that's sufficient reason not to tell the whole truth.
So I told that story to a friend who happens to
Yeah.
live in Israel, and her first thing was Shulam Bias.
Shalom bayit. Very good.
Right?
Very good. Totally. Right. Remember, a lot of this is phrased as, what is a greater value? Truth or peace? But remember, this contradicts the earlier story in the Talmud. This was also, the behavior, I forget which rabbi it was. It was Rava, who also lied for the sake of shalom bayis, but he was kicked out of the town. So what's interesting when you compare the two is that community standards matter. Community standards matter. The place you are matters. Whether it's a specific small place, like I gave the example of a court of law. In a court of law, some things, what you say, the standard of truth that you have to tell is very different than the standard of truth you might tell on the street. It reminds me of like a Middle Eastern market. Everybody knows that the first price that you get in a Middle Eastern market from the salesman is not the correct price, right? It's socially acceptable to lie and to begin a process of bargaining, right? It's just that there might be different standards in the home, different standards in official places than standards that exist in the marketplace. So when it comes to truth and lying, the situation matters tremendously. Let's begin today with the third story of a lie which might be approved in the Torah. This is the famous story of Rebekah, who tricks Isaac into switching the blessing. Now, this is a much more challenging situation than the first two situations. It seems to be rather uncontroversial that we're going to lie to save a life. We already know in Judaism, saving a life comes first. Humiliating Abraham by giving him unnecessary information, that doesn't seem to be that controversial either. This story is much more controversial, and it's phrased as, I phrased it as lying for divine purpose. Lying to right a wrong. That is an error. It should be, as I'm embarrassed by, that should be R-I-G-H-T. Okay, who can tell this? Rochelle, do you want to read this? Are you okay with reading the story? Let's go slowly. Just you, many of you know this already, but let's review it. Genesis 27, when Isaac was old.
When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, My son, here I am. No, my son, here I am. Isaac said, I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessings before I die. Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessings in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies. Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, But my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing.
So you see, what's interesting is, and I never noticed these verses until I was really studying this closely. Rebekah, we know, she wants to trick her husband, who's blind, and it's very clear, right? She wants to give him good food to eat so that he's busy with his food and interested in his food and not so much in what's happening in front of him. But Jacob protests. Do you see that? Jacob even says to his mother, Mom, that's lying. Right? It's not just he's going to recognize me and we're going to get caught. That he also says. But it's deeper than that. It's, you're asking me to trick my father. Keep going.
His mother said to him, My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me.
I know what I'm doing. And I know that you are an instrument in this big conspiracy. This is a very, very important line. What is the line in Hebrew, by the way? Did I include the Hebrew? Which verse is it? 13. I just, important verses I want to read in the Hebrew. Alai kilalatcha beni. Let your klala, let this curse. So what I'm doing is wrong. She knows it's a curse. But let this curse, any curse, it seems she's saying, for this wrongdoing, come upon me. Shma v'koli velech kachli. Just listen to what I'm saying and do what I'm asking you to do. Keep going.
So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her oldest son, which she had in the house, and put them on her youngest son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my gain so that you may give me your blessing."
And so on, right? So, thank you, Rochelle. Do you see how this is a much more challenging story than the first two that I presented? The first two, it's very, very clear, that lying has some moral worth. Here, Isaac says, "I want to bless my firstborn." And Rebekah concocts a scheme. Now, why is she doing this? This is a big question. Why does Rebekah feel the need to switch the two sons? They're both her children. Esau is the firstborn. Jacob is not. Why is she doing this? Does the Torah say why?
She's always favored Jacob, and Jacob basically was the studious one, the one who, apparent from the stories that come out of the Parsha, he was the studious one. He was the one that was closer to
Yes, very
her
good.
ideal.
Yeah.
What the leader
So
should
she
be.
prefers him.
But on the other hand, Esau, according to what we read, has shown qualities that he's like the Vilda Chaya. He's
Yes.
out there in the field. He's chasing after women. I mean, he's showing things that don't make him
Right.
the person that should be carrying.
So I think that is the correct answer. Do you all see that? Rebekah sees, to put it briefly, that Isaac is making a mistake. That Isaac is going to bless the wrong child because the younger one has better qualities of leadership and qualities which make him more deserving of the family's riches than Esau. And so she takes matters into her own hands and rights this wrong. Right? That, I would say, is the most common way of understanding the story.
That supersedes the laws of the Torah.
And she says, say that again?
Does that supersede the laws of the Torah?
Right. So the question is, why if it's made clear that in the end of the day that the blessing went to the wrong person, can't we go back in time and say, yeah, but Isaac clearly made a mistake because the older son deserves more of the blessing? So we actually don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question. Doesn't the laws of being the firstborn supersede the laws of the blessing? It seems that what's at play here is much more, you see, the laws of Bechor were about material inheritance, whereas what's in play here is not material inheritance, but the spiritual inheritance. Who will be the patriarch? Who will inherit the covenantal blessing? And Isaac does receive the covenantal blessing, and nobody protests, right? Most importantly, God doesn't protest. So this is the other way of looking at the story. That's why there's a slash there in how I am defining the motivation of Rebekah's lie. The most common way of understanding the lie is she is righting Isaac's wrong. The other way of looking at this story is she has some divine knowledge. It's not mentioned, but that she knew from a godly perspective that he was making a mistake. Now, do you see the difference between the two, by the way? I think it's very important to understand the difference between the two explanations. In one case, she is acting of her own accord. If you ask me, that's a much more dangerous proposition to submit. Do you understand why? Because what you're basically saying is, you can lie if you yourself think somebody's making a mistake. You are entitled to lie, and God will smile upon that. You're acting of your own accord. You have no special or divine knowledge, but if your conscience deeply feels that a mistake is being made, you can alter the situation and change the facts. That's a major, major problem, I would say, or not a problem yet, but it's a very difficult contention to think about. You understand why? I mean, what you're basically saying is let's say you don't like the will that your husband drew up. I mean, even today, you can change things and there's no problem with that, right? If you feel there's a mistake. There's less of a problem with the second way of understanding the story, because the second way of understanding the story says that she's not just acting, or is interpreted such that she is not acting of her own conscience, but God has instructed her. Somehow God is telling her that this is the right thing to do. Now, that is much more. Why is that more comfortable? Because obviously, if God tells you to do something, right, then you do it. It's not her acting upon her own judgment. It's her acting with divine knowledge. We can be much more comfortable with that. And by the way, what is the evidence in this story? Think about it. What is the evidence in this story that she is acting with divine consent all along? Well, the evidence is that God doesn't protest. If this was her own conscience doing this, then God would have said later on in the story, "What have you done? You gave the blessing to the wrong person." Why would God reward a situation like this, a giant fabrication? God would say, "This is a lie. I'm going to curse your mother." It's this confidence of Rebekah saying to her son, "Let the curse fall upon me." It's this confidence that seems to indicate that this is more than just her conscience that is motivating her. She has some divine knowledge that what is about to happen between Isaac and Esau is a mistake, is a divine mistake, not just a mistake that she thinks is a mistake, but a a sort of cosmic error where everything gets messed up. Now, where is the line between conscience and divine intuition? That's a very, very difficult line to draw. When do I say I'm acting because I believe that I'm correct? And when do I say I'm acting and doing something immoral because I know that what I'm doing is correct? I know that God would be on the side of allowing me to lie. I don't know where that line is drawn, but I am a little bit more comfortable, just me personally, with the narrative that explains Rebecca's behavior in a more prophetic way. Do you know what do you understand what I'm saying when I'm submitting that? That this is not just her own conscience. I think when we go there, we've got a lot of problems. A lot of problems. How dare she? I mean, she's not the patriarch. How can she do this to her husband? It's disloyal. It's right? It's almost an act of opposition to God, because if God caused Esau to be the firstborn, then God knew what he was doing. How dare you intervene with your own sensitivities and sensibilities? Okay, a couple of comments.
Well, I just wonder, I like this line of thinking, but it does open up a door for a great deal of abuse.
Tremendously, of course.
Yeah,
You see the line, right, if you believe that your lying will lead to the right outcome, in other words, that your malicious means will immoral means will justify a just end, then you're permitted to lie, right? Very, very challenging. But that's exactly, what Marlene said this story tells. A couple of comments, yeah. Yeah.
It brings to mind when God told Abraham, listen to Sarah.
Yeah. Well, I'm more comfortable with that because I hear God's voice in that story. In this story, I don't hear God's voice while it's happening. I just hear God's voice after the fact that God seems to be okay with the whole thing. God doesn't put a curse upon Rebecca, which you would expect him to do if God was unhappy with what's going on. So in the end, this whole scheme leads to divine approval. It's just, did God tell Rebecca what to do beforehand or not? So we have to fill in the blanks of the story. Yes?
I'm disturbed by the lack of one voice between Yitzhak and Rivka.
Yeah, very good. So why doesn't Rebecca go to her husband and say, honey, you're making a mistake?
Wait, that would work.
Yeah.
She is actually going against her husband.
Yeah.
And she's lying to him.
Yeah.
She is lying to her children. She is lying to herself.
Yeah.
And she was such a good woman. That's my namesake.
Yeah. So you're taking this personally.
I am taking this very personally.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I was engaged to Yitzhak.
Right.
Well,
But remember, the story is much less
no,
offensive.
I just want to finish. I
Yep.
don't like it when we find a way to absolve a wrong. To
Right.
say it was done, but here is the way we can and find why.
You think we should just say plainly, Rebecca acted immorally.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. I
Not just
think your challenge,
It's correct because it says you shall.
but your challenge is, if she acted incorrectly, why did God not punish her?
Oh, to some
The
people,
way
you get
this,
away with
the way this story is told, both in the text and after the text, is God up. This is why I'm saying these three cases of lying that I'm presenting to you, it's not just stories of lies, it's stories of lies that gain divine approval. God seems to be okay with this. And the metaphor of Isaac's, phrase this differently, Isaac's blindness may also be a metaphor. That is, he may not just have been blind physically.
The thing is that is God never wrong?
God is never wrong. How can you say that? Of course God is never wrong. Right? Now, sometimes when God does something wrong, or appears God does something wrong, we might not understand, the circumstances that we have, the facts that we have. At the end of the day, God has to be correct.
Are we not made in God's image? That sometimes if we're wrong, he can be wrong?
I leave that question standing. Yes. Yeah, a few more comments. Rochelle. Yeah?
Right.
What I don't understand.
Just one sec, Rochelle.
So God gave Isaac the covenant.
Yeah.
Shouldn't he know that he should give it to Jacob?
Well, obviously not. The covenant does not mean you are a prophet, right? Or that you can always... God bestowed upon him a covenant, did not bestow upon him godhood, right? He didn't become a god such that he could see clearly the right thing to do. He still needed his judgment, and in this case, perhaps his judgment was incorrect.
Okay, I understand that this is for divine purpose.
Yep.
What I don't understand is Isaac, whether he was blind or not, whether Jacob was standing there or not, he was giving his blessing to Esau.
Yes, yeah.
Whether or not Esau was standing
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
God was giving it to Esau.
Yep,
Bravo.
yeah. Right.
So how is it?
You're saying because his intent
Yes.
was to get, what we learn from this story is that your intent is irrelevant. Isaac's intent was irrelevant, at least in the way things worked at that time, even though he intended to give the blessing but by the way, your question is asked by some commentators. That is there not this deception that continues because intention should matter? The commentaries ask that question, and some think Isaac was in on it. Let me explain. That Isaac was in on the scheme too. In order to, this is a much more far-fetched version of the story, but it's being told in order to settle that concern. That Isaac did not have the intent to bless Esau. He was also part of the scheme. So why didn't he just bless Jacob to begin with? Because it would have angered Esau. This way he could blame. When Esau says to him, "You fool, you stole it from me," he could say, "No, I didn't. She did. It was your brother. He scammed me, right? And look what I did. I sent him off." Remember that Isaac, might have been a bit afraid of Esau, because Esau was known to be a hunter and a man of the field. So sometimes, you might want to lie to a child just to keep peace and not lead to aggression. He's very advanced in age here and may not have wanted to leave the world with contention between him and his older son.
I just want to go back to Rebecca, and I may have the story wrong, but
Yep.
something in my head is telling me. I think that Rebecca got that message when she was part where they're fighting.
Yes, so that's the,
each other,
yes,
And she's given a message.
Right.
About the younger.
the younger shall serve the elder. So this is,
The elder shall serve the younger.
that's right. So those who believe that this story is Rebecca acting with divine consent will point to that story saying that she knew all along that Jacob was the one who deserved and would be entitled to that blessing. And when she didn't see the facts lining up the way that she perceived that they ought to, she intervened. That is also a challenging story, right? You know, aren't you supposed to trust God and say, listen, in the end, I'm sure God's prophecy will come through. So it doesn't absolve us of this question completely, but it does certainly help us to explain things with less of a sense that Rebecca really is guilty because she was just relying on her own sense of what was right instead of some divine assistance pointing her in the direction that can justify the lie.
And the second part of it all is she didn't directly get the curse, but her family was.
Yeah, so that's another way that this story is understood, right? She says, let the sin come upon me. Not the sin, let the curse come upon me. As far as we know, there's no curse that comes upon her, except one. Could one say that the contention which lasts for years between Jacob and Esau, that is the curse? I don't love that explanation because as much as she was impacted by that curse, so was Jacob. And what she says to Jacob in that verse that I read to you is, let your curse come upon me. And to me that ought to read, you will not suffer for this. I will suffer from it. So I don't love that reading of the story because Jacob does end up suffering tremendously because of this. He's exiled and stuck in the wilderness for a long time and living with Laban, and his life is ruined because of this event.
And his children argue amongst each other.
And his children argue amongst each other too, so that's not fair, right? If Rebecca says, let the curse come upon me, it should be in your stead. So I'm not settled by that reading, but I've read that interpretation. It's not a crazy interpretation.
In biblical times, even though there were two sons, is the older son, notwithstanding what the parents knew about him,
Yeah.
is the older son automatically.
Yes, so that's the comment that was made before, that the older child is always entitled to more of the inheritance, double the inheritance of the other children. And so that's probably what was motivating Isaac. Not so much that he was the favorite child of his, but that he was the older one. Obviously, he's going to get the blessing. That's how it works. But
The royal family.
right, exactly. But there's a problem here because she intervenes, because Rebecca intervenes. So personally, I'm more comfortable with the read of the story being that Rebecca knew that Isaac was making a mistake. She didn't just know it by her conscience, but there was some divine knowledge, prophetic knowledge that she had going way back to the beginning of the story. And she took matters into her own hands when she sees things going in the wrong direction. Why do I prefer that read of the story? Because to me, the other read of the story is very, very morally problematic, right? So I want us to understand the moral problem that I'm running away from, because it may not be as morally problematic to you.
Let's hear it.
When I know that it's all about the means justifying the ends. That's what it is, right? If I know that the ends of whatever is happening before me are going in the wrong direction, I am permitted to take whatever means necessary to alter those means. Does that make sense? I don't know if I said it very clearly. But when I see things happening in front of me that are true, but that are going to lead to the wrong outcome, I am permitted to intervene, to lie, to do things that are immoral. Whatever means I undertake, they are justified because they will lead to the right ends. This goes way, way back to our first story, Rava. What is the ends of that story? That my wife can be left alone to wash her hair because it would be immodest for someone to walk in. Who the heck cares how that goal is accomplished? If it has to be accomplished through lying, let it be accomplished through lying. I can get rid of this person sooner if I just tell her my wife is not home. It goes back to that initial story, and maybe Rava is correct. I can lie as long as the end is my wife is left alone. What's happening in the end is shalom, right? Everyone's just peaceful and happy.
But one is a little lie.
Okay, yes, yeah. I accept that. I accept that. I accept that. Of course, this is the whole inheritance of the covenant of the Jewish people. That's different than your wife washing her hair. Yes.
So I guess
Ross.
what troubles me in this story is that I wish there was more evidence that God had talked to Rebecca. Or
Yeah, of course.
Because
Of
we're
course.
assuming that
Of
this
course.
is the right interpretation.
Of course.
But there's evidence from this words that, I mean, Esau is a diligent
That
son.
she is taking things into her own hands.
But the
Yeah.
words are telling us that Esau is a diligent son.
Right.
He's going out, he's hunting, and there's this
Yeah.
repetition of tasty food.
Marlene doesn't like it. She's nodding her hair. But I totally believe that tension is purposeful. The tension in the text, the discussion we are having, is very purposeful. We are supposed to feel like she's acting with a little bit of foreknowledge and foresight, but she's also acting with a little bit of chutzpah.
But we're assuming
God is here, but so is her conscience. And you know what? I like that because that's life. Life is risk-taking. I don't know what's going to happen necessarily by me making a particular decision. I'm taking a risk. But that's life. You go with your gut. Her gut was telling her, for whatever reason, this feels wrong to me. Do I know if that's just me and my conscience? Or is it also my prayer? Is it also this prophecy that I had 20 years ago? That is life. I relate to that tension much more than if it was just clear that she was acting of her own accord, or clear that she was just following God's instructions. Following God's instructions is not how life works. When you make the decision to marry your husband or to marry your wife, God does not come down and say, you made the right decision. You take a risk. You take a risk. I marry people all the time. I follow my heart. I know that it's right. It's all a combination between what you feel your destiny might be and just, I don't really know, I'm rolling the dice and let's see what happens.
One more point. She can make the decision for herself. If she were to go on to have to do something
Yeah.
to correct. But the fact
What
that
bothers
she
you
makes
is the deception,
for
Isaac.
other people.
Right. Yeah.
And
The deception bothers you.
And gratuitously say, the curse will fall on me, but in fact, it pits the brothers against each other in their strife, and the husband is totally out of the picture.
Right.
She doesn't honor him at all.
Right.
This doesn't make sense. So many millennia later, after now this class reading this
Yes.
particular parsha, can say, we solved it.
Yeah.
She was wrong.
The deception bothers you. The deception bothers you. It ought to bother all of us. But I think there's a deeper question here of whether deception might sometimes be justified for the sake of a higher truth. There's the truth with a capital T. The truth with a capital T is that Jacob is the rightful inheritor of the covenant. That is capital T truth. And in order to get there, I may not have to follow the lowercase t truth, which is always to speak the truth. And sometimes in life, you have to deceive other people in order to get to where you think things ought to be.
And maybe that should have been Isaac's decision.
Okay, all of these are I let these,
And Isaac made the
I hear your objections. I am presenting the story not because I have all the answers. It's for the exact opposite reason. Because I want you to understand the moral dilemma, the tension here. It's going to help us formulate a Jewish view on when one ought to lie and when one ought to tell the truth.
Start building a hierarchy of lies.
Yes,
And
yeah.
at the highest level,
that's right.
you can justify it in some way.
That's right. Listen, this happens in yeshivas all the time. There was a famous story where the decision to take out Osama bin Laden, there's a famous picture of the Situation Room when they got Osama bin Laden. And who was the Secretary of State at that time? Hillary Clinton. Now in Haredi newspapers, ultra-Orthodox newspapers, it is forbidden to print pictures of women, right? Particularly women in pantsuits. Hillary always wore a pantsuit. The picture was posted in the Yated Ne'eman, which is the major Orthodox newspaper, without Hillary Clinton's face in it. They edited out her picture. And this was challenged by the modern Orthodox newspapers saying, this is disgusting. How do you edit out her face? And they answered with this very similar rationale. The deception, deleting her from that picture as an act of deception, is warranted because of a higher truth. And that is that women should not be seen, in pantsuits. Whatever version of our higher truth is. That a woman might be seen in pantsuit and it might lead to the degradation of the community. That is the higher truth that we answer to, and therefore the deception is warranted. Well, folks, they learned from a good example. If what Rebecca did was approved, then why not? If I believe there's a higher truth that can be justified, then I'm permitted to take whatever steps necessary in order to sustain that higher truth. Let's look at Maimonides now. Maimonides, who picks up on that theme. I'm going to read this because I want to go slowly through. Maimonides, remember, is a medieval legal theorist and interpreter. This is from the Mishnah Torah. The Mishnah Torah is supposed to be a book of laws. Here are the laws of how we ought to conduct our lives. That is what Maimonides is presenting in the 11th century. Commenting here on the verse in Leviticus 19, do not go as a talebearer among your people, lo telech rachil be'amecha, lo ta'amod al damrecha, do not stand idly by your neighbor's blood, I am God. The challenge with this verse, in interpreting this verse, is what is the relationship between the first thing the verse says, don't go out as a talebearer among your people, and the second thing the verse says, which seems to be completely unrelated, do not stand idly by your neighbor's blood. So Maimonides is attempting to explain why these two prohibitions are one next to the other. Understood? A person who collects gossip about a colleague violates a prohibition, as Leviticus states, do not go around gossiping among your people. Even though this transgression is not punished by lashes, it is a severe sin and can cause the death of many Jews. Therefore, the warning, do not stand still over your neighbor's blood, is placed to it next to the Torah. So how does Maimonides understand do not go out as a talebearer among your people? It is a person who collects gossip about a colleague. And I like the English translation here. To collect gossip, which is, we don't usually use that verb. We can say a gossiper or someone who gossips. This is someone who collects gossip. Do you see the difference? Someone who collects gossip is sort of soliciting. Have you heard about this person? Have you heard about that person? Can you tell me a little bit about them? I really like that English translation of hamiragel b'chavero. It's not that I'm not permitted to share knowledge about somebody else. It's that there is a degrading attitude towards that belongs to those who go out seeking information about others, by the way, whether true or false. And this is how Maimonides understands the relationship between the first part of the verse and the second part of the verse. Why does it say don't stand idly upon the blood of your neighbor? Because gossip causes bloodshed. When you collect gossip about other people, it leads to murder. And you can sort of see that there's some relationship between the two, because gossip leads to animosity, right? When things spread. Who is a gossiper? This is really important. If gossiping leads to murder, what is this sin? Let us define this sin. We all talk. We all talk about other people, sometimes with no malicious intent. Hey, how's Maureen doing? I heard she was sick. She's doing a lot better right now. Oh, great. We just had a conversation about somebody else. I asked about somebody else. Does that make me a gossiper? Am I collecting information about somebody else? I don't know. I mean, it depends what it means to be a gossiper, and that's what Maimonides is going to try and define. So who is a gossiper? One who collects information and then goes from person to person saying This is what so-and-so said. This is what I heard about so-and-so. Even if the statements are true, they bring about the destruction of the world. So this first statement that Maimonides makes is, I just received information about Maureen. She's doing better. She's not in the hospital anymore. That doesn't make me a gossiper. What would make me a gossiper? If I then, and I think the key word here is, I go to other people. Hamisaper bignut chavero. Sorry. It says, holech mizeh lezeh. I go from person to person. The verb holech, I go, seems to convey a sort of gratifying feeling that I receive from having secret knowledge that you don't have, and I get to tell it to you. That, for Maimonides, I think, is the definition of a gossiper. It's someone who gets satisfaction from giving confidential knowledge to somebody else, even if it's true. And this is the real challenge here. Even if it's true. That is, maybe, friends, we're having the wrong discussion. Maybe here we are in the chapel arguing about when we can lie and when we can tell the truth. And the real discussion ought to be, when can we talk and when ought we shut up? That the real question isn't not whether I can lie, but whether I can say anything in the first place. If I have knowledge that you don't have, and I go out and tell you about it, not because you asked, but because I think it would make me feel good. I should not be doing that in the first place. It brings about the destruction of the world. Can I just ask the audience, why does that bring about in your mind? Maimonides doesn't explain how. Going out and finding people to give secret knowledge to destroys the world. That's a major statement. Do you think it's true? Do you think it's an exaggeration? No. What do you think? Fiona?
Stories change, they grow.
Right.
More facts get added.
Yeah.
And it never ends up like the original fact.
Yeah.
Might have been given.
So in other words, these lies, what is true, you're saying that what starts out as true through broken telephone quickly becomes lies. Great. What else?
Very often when you have some information and you tell it to your best friend and you say, I heard this, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And that usually gets broken.
Yes, so that is, I think that's an easier example though, because then you've told your friend, keep it private. Well, if you say keep it private, then I do understand, okay, that's really a destruction of a friendship to go out there and spread it. But here, Maimonides isn't saying you even need to be told to keep it quiet. Even if you received information about another person and go out and tell it to somebody else, it's true. You're destroying the world.
Well, that's not when you say, we just had a baby boy.
It could be.
How?
Well, I'm asking the question. Is Maimonides crazy, or is there some truth to what he's saying? Going out and telling people information that is true destroys the world.
It goes back to the first part of the commandment, to not be
But
a tale.
why? Why? Why does it bring murder? Why does it destroy the world?
Because what you
But it's true. Maureen's out of the hospital. It's great news.
It doesn't say in here true or false, it just, that don't
Right.
say it. So,
But why the destruction of the world?
because everybody becomes a sinner at that point.
Why are they sinning? There's no sin in me telling the truth.
Because they become talebearers, and they've been told not to become.
I think that's a circular argument. I think you're saying you're a talebearer, so you're sinning, so you can't tell tales. You're not explaining to me why Maimonides feels that me sharing news, true news with other people, whether it's good or whether it's bad, leads to the destruction of the world. That's a huge statement, and I want to know why you think he might feel that that's...
I think it depends on what you say. Me as a person, I appreciate the notes from the show when someone passes away.
Yeah.
I might know them, but I would never have known they passed away. And I appreciate that.
Yes.
And maybe I know that this was a friend. I could call her and say, did you know someone passed away? And she might be grateful for that news.
Yeah.
She never saw it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So the good stuff, there's certain things that you do want to pass on so that other people who might know them want to hear that.
Right.
But when it comes to
So for you,
something
it's...
that's not good,
Ah.
it can be.
So but you still feel it's situational, and sometimes it is okay to share news with other people.
What
Maimonides doesn't say that.
Yes and no.
Maimonides is much stricter. He says, you are a gossiper if you go out and share news about somebody else, whether it's good or bad, whether it's true or false. You are guilty of gossip, and you are leading to the destruction of the world.
Because
Well-
he doesn't know what you're saying, what you're telling is gonna land on the proper ears.
Okay, maybe. Maybe it'll go, right? Violations of confidence, Deborah?
It's idle work. There are
I like
other
that.
things to do.
Yes.
That are more
I like that a lot.
Well, also, I don't think I equate news with gossip. News to me sounds like information that you're sharing. Gossip to me doesn't sound like news, and I think you also need to consider the intent of sharing whatever it is that you're sharing.
So you think Maimonides is being too strict? Maimonides doesn't yet, at least we haven't seen yet, but from what we've read so far about Maimonides, when we've heard that comment before, Maimonides is being too tough. There's some news that you should be able to share. What's the big deal? If I'm going out and telling you that somebody's out of the hospital or somebody you love passed away, why is that so bad? I tend to side with Roz in trying to, I'm not defending Maimonides here, I'm just saying, how do we understand Maimonides and this correlation between I'm telling things to people and the world is going to be destroyed? Whether it's true or whether it's news, correct news, what's the problem? And I think what Roz is saying is a society, we're talking about the destruction of the world, that is where everybody is going out to share secret information, is feeding into a part of the human psyche. You are nourishing your ego in a way that produces human beings that are destructive to relationships and destructive to others. And that is Maimonides' fear. Me giving you secret knowledge that you don't have feeds into the human ego, that I'm better than you. Look, I know something that you don't know. I saw it first. The person who told me likes me more than you because I found out before you did. You never know.
Schadenfreude, like the pleasure in other people's pain, but not also the...
I think that's exactly it, right? I don't know if in every situation it's pain, but it can be. I may have just innocently told you about Maureen coming out of the hospital, but the person this good, positive news, but the person I shared it with goes, that's strange. Why would her husband tell her before she told me? All this innocent stuff ends up creating a whole mess. Now, 90% of the time, it doesn't. But Maimonides, if I'm trying to understand him, I think what he's talking about is that aspect of human psychology that makes me want to go out and share information with other people is a very dangerous piece of the human psyche. Remember, Maimonides is a doctor. And he's worried about people who busy themselves, as Roz was saying. Don't you have anything better to do? That's why when I think he says, Holech, you're going out, it's like the second you find out this information, the first thought that comes to your mind is, who can I tell this to? Who can I tell? What? Do you know such people? You do? I'm shocked such people exist. I know such people. I find people know on Shabbos that there's news that I don't receive. And like this Shabbos, the big news was who won the Blue Jays game. I didn't know who won the game when I came in, and my son didn't know either, and he was really thirsty for information. And you see how many people are anxious to say the Blue Jays. This was on Friday night. They destroyed them. It was great. Now that's good news that they are spread. But Maimonides might say, it's not that you shared that. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's a silly baseball game. But it's that aspect that makes you want to be the first one to jump up and tell the rabbi what happened that he missed. It's that part of the human psyche that I worry about. What you said did nothing wrong, but you're feeding into a part of yourself that is making you feel better and superior by being the guy who told the rabbi about the Blue Jays, and that's really schadenfreude, ego. It's you told them, so your neighbor doesn't have to tell them because I got to him first, right? Couple of comments, yeah.
I'm wondering if Maimonides is ahead of his time, because isn't really what he's saying here is that information is proprietary. It's my information to give out. It's not for anybody else.
Yeah.
Which I think would have implications for where we're going today with artificial intelligence.
True. Forget with Twitter and everything. Like today, there are no secrets, and we love saying original, interesting things that get a lot of likes and comments and sharing. A person should shy away from that kind of attention. Yeah.
I have a little group of about 10 women in my building.
But just let's stick to this. Okay.
And when they get together, they're giving information about others.
I know, but don't tell us
everybody-
about people gossiping.
And
There,
I sit
we
there-
probably know some of those 10 women.
And I sit there stim.
Yeah.
That's no fun.
I have nothing to say. Yes, a couple of comments.
It is much safer to share your own information with somebody.
Yes,
without you.
right. And Maimonides does not criticize that. You have the ability to talk about your problems to whoever you want to. It's the person who goes out, got information from somebody else, and then is holech. Let's finish this because I want to get through at least Maimonides today. We only have a few minutes left. There is a much more serious sin than gossip, which is also included in this prohibition, lashon hara. Now you've heard this before. So what's interesting is he's going to define lashon hara differently than gossip. Gossip, which we often will translate as lashon hara, he says it's different. The gossiper goes out and shares information that he or she received with somebody else. So what is the one guilty? Who is the one guilty of lashon hara?
Saying bad things about them.
There is no. Wait. I'm happy you said that because you're going to see he's got an even worse category for that. There's a much more serious sin, which is also included in this prohibition, lashon hara, which is relating, deprecating facts about a colleague, even if they are true. Even if they are true. Lashon hara isn't about situational facts. Maureen got out of the hospital. Such and such person passed away. It's a much more serious sin because you're not talking about a situation. You're not describing a setting or an event. You are dealing with something much more serious. It's my recommendation letter. You are talking about a person. When you, and this is very wise, I think, of Maimonides. What he says is, listen, it's a serious sin and it's going to lead to the destruction of the world if we're constantly invested in telling other people things we know that they don't know. But there's, within that, a category that's even more sensitive, that's far more, has far more serious repercussions, and that is when the facts that you're going to provide lead to you deprecating somebody else, even if it's true. Even if it's true. So again, Maimonides says, this isn't about what's true and false. There's something else, which is what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. He's not happy about you saying anything about anything to anybody. But he's really not happy about those who share deprecating facts about others. And again, even if it's true, this person is cheap, this person isn't a great worker, this person is cruel, anything that might disparage another person, that is lashon hara. Now, is it all evil speech?
No.
All deprecating facts? No, you're still gone out. You are still holech. You've gone out to tell other people there's something in you that's taking pleasure in sharing these facts. Yes?
However, I have been told that if you know, for instance, someone is going into business or thinking of going into business with a crooked
Yeah.
then that is no
Okay,
longer
very good comment. Very good comment. This goes back to the recommendation letter, right? Don't I have an obligation to tell the truth in that situation? So we're going to look at that next week. What about the need to speak deprecating things? In defense of Maimonides, in this example, I would say, remember, this is all about holech, the one who by his own accord is motivated to share deprecating information. He's doing it not because someone asked him, and I think not because it's going to help any situation. It's because they take pleasure in gossiping about other people. Next page. Lashon hara does not refer to the invention of lies. That is referred to as defamation of character. This is like the worst of the worst. It's bad to share information about a situation. It's worse to share poor character traits about anybody. And it's even worse when those are not true. That's defamation of character. Rather, one who speaks lashon hara is someone who sits and relates, this is what so-and-so has done. His parents were such and such. This is what I've heard about him. telling uncomplimentary things. The key word here, I think, for Maimonides is, like in the previous paragraph, it was holech. He's going out to spread news about other people, secret knowledge. Here, it's interesting. It's the opposite word. It's yoshev. You're sitting. This is your bridge game. You're sitting around. It's boring. There's nothing to do. Let's talk, gossip about other people. I love that in one case, Maimonides uses your holech. That's the word, that's leading to let me rephrase that. When you go out and tell tales about other people, it's bad. When you sit and tell tales about other people, it's worse. Because no one asked you. No one asked you, about this. You've got nothing to do. So let's talk about other people. Now, he's very clear. You can talk about other people. You're saying bad things about them. Even if it's true. Anything negative about other people when you have not been asked is considered to be lashon hara. Concerning this transgression, the verse states, "May God cut off all guileful lips, the tongues which speak proud things." So there's Maimonides using a verse that speaks to character, and you get a sense of where he's coming from. Why do I love Maimonides? Because Maimonides, among all of our sages, spends the most time talking about, despite the fact that he wrote a book about Jewish law, spends the most time talking about character. For Maimonides, all of the laws are designed to elevate the human being, to improve the human being. And so gossip may not hurt. It may even help. Maureen got out of the hospital. It led me to bring her some soup. Whatever it is. I gave her a call. Nothing bad may have happened. Maimonides doesn't care about what actually happens in the situation. He's worried about the character of a person who takes satisfaction in spreading stories about other people, even more concerned of the character of a person who enjoys sharing unsolicited information about somebody else that is deprecatory, is that a word? Deprecating information about somebody else.
So you made her some soup, you said to somebody. You made her some soup.
Yeah.
And that person, you got that information from him. He made her soup, and what he expected me to do something.
Yeah.
That is the much.
But again, I get it. I just want us to understand where Maimonides is coming from. And we will see next week different points of view that argue with him. That he's being too strict. That this is sort of the society that he's building is a society where nobody takes care of one another because nobody's talking about anybody else. And by the way, taking care of other people might even mean lying. You say, what do you mean? It might be permitted to share lies about somebody? Well, we just spent the first half of this class saying, Rebecca lied. She lied to her husband, but it may have been justified because in the end, the message was received. Jacob got the birthright. So others will argue with Maimonides and say, you're being too tough. The ends do justify the means, and I should be allowed to share deprecatory information. If I have to exaggerate to my kid that I really can't stand her boyfriend, even though I don't mind him, but I really need to get that point home. I'm allowed. It's just an example, right? But Maimonides is a purist, and I want to just emphasize why he's a purist and have you think about that. Leave this class thinking about that. The purist Maimonides is not worried about society as much as he is worried about your soul. And in a world like we live in today, where gossip is rampant, maybe he's right. Maybe it has gotten so out of control, the joy we take in sharing information about others. Maybe our souls are being tarnished by this, even though nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's getting hurt except each of us individually. Yeah.
Isn't your sermon on integrity purist?
I don't even remember. What sermon did I? That was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks ago.
If you don't remember it.
Yes.
I have a video recording that you did it to you.
I
think that's the best sermon.
Well, I submit these things not because I submit these things not because I am trying to persuade you that I am right, but often to give, although that would be nice, it is often to give you just food for thought. Most of the people in this room are wiser than I am. I'm not, that is not a lie. That is a truth. And my job is to give you categories in Judaism, to think about things that you probably have already thought about, but just dig a little deeper into what you've already. So I think we have some great source material here to help us think more deeply about these questions, and there'll be more next week.
Thank you.
Have a great day.